light of where AI is taking us that your work matters. But before that, let me tell you about a time that I was surprised. So I've been working in AI since 2007. I've been studying how large language models could affect our writing since 2015. I've been teaching Calvin students how these large language models work since 2021. So when ChatGPT came around in 2022, it surprised me a little bit. I'd underestimated the breadth and depth of internet text, and I'd underestimated the power of feedback to tune the model. But really, it was kind of an incremental improvement on what was there before. What really surprised me was what came after that. And I'll capture it in a moment. When I was listening to a podcast that was just discussing how much companies were spending on capital investment, like building capacity, building physical, durable goods around data centers and AI. And they just casually threw out a bunch of numbers, and one of them was like $600 billion. Wait. Pause the podcast. $600 billion? I just had to grapple with the scale of that. And it sort of dawned on me that AI isn't just this intellectual curiosity or a toy or an interesting thing to read papers about anymore. It's now becoming this durable infrastructure that, like it or not, is shaping the world. So my overall message today is that since the AI movement is way bigger than today's products, then Calvin's mission of forming students to be Christ's agents of renewal matters more than ever. To do that, I'm going to try to help you through two moves. First, the classic liberal arts move of going from just critiquing the current set of products to taking a broader frame and thinking about the context and history, the culture and technology movement that's powering this, so we can see where it's going. And second, the formational move, thinking more than just how do we use or not use these particular set of tools, to what sort of people, what sort of character are we forming, what community can we be forming? So first, the liberal arts move. And we start, as a good liberal arts scholar should, by asking the definitional question, what is AI? Many of us have only experienced AI products. You think about ChatGPT or speech recognition on your phone, who's been swiped for spending a whole night watching Netflix and TikTok because the next thing it recommended was interesting to you. No? Nobody? Yeah. No. So these are all products, the things that this movement has produced. To face this moment wisely, we need to step back and see what is the movement that produced these. A representative quote comes from Denis Hassabis, the CEO of Google's DeepMind AI Research Lab. He says, first, solve intelligence. Solve intelligence. Then use that to solve everything else. Translation, all of the world's problems can be solved if we just figure out how to get computers smarter. The core values of this movement are performance, and not just performance at unique individual tasks, but performance in general. And this movement traces its roots back to around the 1950s, so long before ChatGPT, 75 years ago. AI pioneers, Marvin Minsky, Alan Turing, others, dreamed about machines that we could just not have to hand engineer to do the things that we want, because even today, still, the machines are kind of frustrating when they don't quite do what we want. But what if the machines could just learn to do the thing that we want them to do? And I'll just mention that most of these researchers were not Christians, but this line of work that they started about how to engineer machines to learn about the world has been enormously successful because God made a world that is rich in complexity and uniqueness, but in a way that is deeply ordered. So learning some about that order is gonna help you enable rich capabilities. It's just part of how God made the world. So how do you make a machine that learns to improve itself? If you want the whole technical details, you'll have to take my AI class, but here's a simple caricature. And I'm ringing a little bit. You can turn me down on the monitor just a little. So what it does is learns to play games. Not just learning to play a game, but learning to play whole classes of games. What do you need in order to learn how to play games? You need three things. You need an environment that's rich enough to have things you can perceive, actions you can take. You need a score for what it means to succeed. What's high score? What's the number that we're trying to do well at? And third, a method to improve both how we perceive and how we choose actions to increase that score. I'll give a couple of examples here. First, let's start with the traditional things that we call games. First checkers and backgammon, and later chess, and most recently there was the system AlphaGo that in 2016 beat the world champion Go player. How did it do that? It learned by trying out new strategies that no human had ever tried before, by playing against itself. So it had an environment where it could play against itself and explore new strategies. But there's lots and lots of other kinds of games that we don't traditionally call games. For example, there's what I mentioned earlier, the Hook the Human game. The TikTok or the Netflix or the Amazon, Facebook, what actions can these agents take? Well, they can recommend something. Here's a video you should watch. Here's a post that you should engage with. Here's a product you should buy. It's score. How much did we engage? Did you buy? Did you stay up late watching Netflix? How much did you scroll? Now, that seems kind of sinister, but not all games are so anti-human. What about games like guessing how a protein will fold? This work led to a Nobel Prize in biology, physics, I forget what else. Or guess the weather. That's a pretty useful thing to know about tomorrow. Design proteins or molecules or processes to produce things. All these can be really useful if we give the machines games that align with what we want to do. There's also, of course, the conversation imitation game that's become super popular in ChatGPT, but it started way back with Alan Turing's imitation game. So now we finally have the ability to imitate conversations. And you'd think imitating conversation kind of quaint, but imagine a conversation with an expert about any topic. It's an awful wide range of things that you can do in the context of just trying to imitate a conversation. And of course, image generation games, video generation games, sound generation games, or games like Prove the Theorem, Write the App, Do the Task kind of proactive agent games. It doesn't have to just be in front of a computer. You can have robot control games. But all of these are successful not because some engineer thought deep and hard about how to engineer exactly what to do in every situation, but because we've been working for this past 75 years to make systems that can perform well in general to learn how to improve themselves. A couple of consequences of this. Today's AI is the worst you'll ever use. Now, it is pretty bad. Don't get me wrong. Its performance can be super spiky. Let's take the conversation imitation game. You have a conversation, and in one phrase that the system is giving you back, it's going to be super insightful. And in the very next phrase in the same sentence, it's dead wrong. Nobody's had that experience? So if you're skeptical about whether these systems are actually delivering what they say they deliver, in the short term, you are right. In the long term, self-improvement is built into the very way these systems are designed, built into the 75-year history. We are not at the beginning of that history. Unfortunately, you're going to be wrong in the long term. Also, you may have heard this metaphor that these systems are just stochastic parrots. And that's a somewhat valuable metaphor, but let's remember that it comes only from the mimicry game, where the systems that kind of appropriated the residue of human experiences. But now we're getting into systems, some have called this the age of experience or the age of exploration, where systems are learning from exploring the world and trying things out on their own. And they're going to learn, sort of like AlphaGo has learned superhuman strategies in this one narrow game of Go. They're going to learn superhuman strategies in a broad range of things. So our intuitions that we developed, or the limitations that we understand about today's systems, aren't going to apply 10 years down the road. Another corollary, since you don't have to hand engineer everything, since the game makes the machine, that means that a lot more people than engineers are going to be part of shaping these systems. So if you are not in engineering or computer science, you now have much more impact in, if you can start to shape what the games these systems are playing, you control the game. But to the machine, it's just a game. So it's going to take shortcuts, it's going to exploit loopholes. Setting up these games carefully, wisely, reflecting on whether it's actually doing the thing that we wanted it to do, that's going to be really important. But don't miss the big picture. These things are starting to actually work. How do we know that? Well, companies are voting with their money. They're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure to accelerate this 75-year-old dream. Not about just making artificial chatbots or artificial persons, but about making technology that can engineer itself to fulfill any dreams and desires that we can quantify in some quantifiable score. So the urge to react to today's products might be helpful and tactical, but it's myopic. We have to discern this movement, where it's going. No matter where it's going, whether we need 2 years to get to superhuman intelligence, as some people say, or it's going to require another couple of generations of incremental improvement or revolutionary improvements, I think it does. Either way, this is already substantially shaping our students' lives and careers. So, what's the formational move? In light of these systems that can engineer themselves to fulfill our desires, what sort of people do we need to be? I'll first want to acknowledge that the fruit of this 75-year movement has not been uniformly good so far. And this goes way deeper than just whether students are cheating with ChatGPT. Early evidence is suggesting that as people over-rely on AI for cognitive tasks, our cognitive abilities are starting to erode. AI developments and products, building these systems and running them requires enormous amounts of energy. Although the flip side of that is maybe this is finally the capital investment required to make fusion power work. That would be kind of exciting. And water to cool the things. More perniciously, the mimicry machines like ChatGPT mimic everything about human experience, including our stereotypes and our worst impulses. And many of them are trained on pirated sources. I could go on, but this has not necessarily been good. But just because it hasn't been good doesn't mean we can say, oops, sorry, you don't want to go there. We're there already. So rather than just trying to say no, we can say, where do we want to go? Technology is an amplifier for our desires. AI even more so. So let's ask the desire question. What kinds of things do we want? Let's want rightly ordered desires. In short, we got to be virtuous people. We need courage to boldly resist that technological reductionism. That's, okay, it's how these game-playing machines work, but if we're honest, it's pervaded so much of our society too, that if we can just reduce everything to a game and numbers that we can improve and stock scores that we can boost up, the world is way more than just these numbers. But we have to also do this in a way that doesn't just fearfully reject anything that smells about AI. We need temperance to avoid getting hooked by the Hook the Human games machines. We need to avoid over-delegating our own thinking and responsibility to AI. We need to pursue justice, not just looking at how we individually are using technical systems, but how the technologies that we are part of forming are affecting our neighbors. And most importantly, we need to be people who face a changing world with wisdom. We need to aim towards true goods so clearly so we will not be distracted by facsimiles. We need to be grounded in the real world. Let me tell you why. So, I tell my students this, especially people who are asking, why are we in the liberal arts? So what kind of things are going to get automated? If you look at the history and where this game setup is going, let's simplify it to this. If you can do a task repeatedly, sitting in front of a computer, and there's a clear definition, you can score how well that task is being done, it's going to get automated sooner or later. So, well, what do we need to do if those kind of things are going to be automated? What's valuable now? Well, maybe it's things that you can do that you have to not sit in front of a computer to do. Maybe things where knowing what good is, you can't just easily put a number on it. And aren't these things that we do here at Calvin? Getting out into the world, engaging the ambiguity of not knowing how to put a number on what's good. So we need to be grounded in the real world. But also, of course, open-minded, curious, discerning, self-sacrificial. We need to be forming students who are wise, adaptable, courageous, temperate in how they decide how to use a constantly changing set of technology. The problem isn't just about whether people are going to use ChatGPT to cheat. It's that we've got these disordered desires for the quick and easy. Successful liberal arts education should not just cultivate our desires, not just regulate our tools. And we need to be a learning community. We're not going to all come to the same place about what particular set of products we're going to use and how, but we're going to need each other more than ever. We've got to build each other up in the good work that God has called us to do. So AI is a new power in the world, at least as significant as computers, smartphones. Think about how your life has changed since computers, smartphones. AI is changing our lives and reality in at least as big a way as that. But it's not just we have resources to face and deal with powers like this as Christian liberal arts scholars. First, as Christians. Paul says in Colossians, in a phrase you're all familiar with, all things were created through him and for him. So Jesus made AI, and he will reconcile it to himself. We need to be deeply rooted in Christ, as Jeremiah says, planted by the water, so that we won't fear when heat comes. And we're not just Christians, we're a Christian liberal arts school. So these practices that we teach throughout the university, critical thinking, deep reading, context, patience to examine reality closely, are going to be specifically valuable here. And don't forget our biggest resources, perhaps, are our shared mission and community. So what's our mission? You all know this. First, think deeply. So we just discovered that. Act justly. So as AI empowers all of our students, not just the engineers, to shape our digital world, we got to cultivate them to act justly. And third part, live wholeheartedly. So a system that's engaging in the world by playing a numbers game, not living wholeheartedly. Let's encourage and cultivate our students to do that, to live wholeheartedly. So that's why I'm here at Calvin, and that's why I think our work, your work, everyone's work here matters. We need to be a community that's not just ignorant or dismissive of this new power, but we also got to believe in our guts and cultivate students who believe deep in their guts that our lives, our neighbors' lives, and this world isn't one big quantifiable game. And we got to work together for this. Faculty, staff got to work together. Administrators are going to need our prayers and visions about what Calvin can become as we lean into this mission. So since AI is way more than ChatGPT, it's now part of our world, let's go on with our work of equipping students to be Christ's agents of renewal in that world. Thank you.